Stepmother abandons millionaire's daughter in a landfill, but fate has other plans. What would you do if in the blink of an eye your life was ripped away from you? If the walls of your safe and privileged world crumbled, leaving you stranded in the darkness, abandoned like trash? And what if, just when you thought it was the end, fate sent you a lifeline from the most unexpected place? Dear family, which country are you watching from? Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe to support us. Now let's get started. The storm raged outside Willow's estate, wind whipping against the towering oak trees that lined the long driveway. Rain lashed against the grand windows, each drop tapping like an urgent warning. Inside, Emily Carter, just 13, sat on her four-poster bed, her small fingers gripping the delicate blue dress draped across her lap. It was her birthday dress, a gift from her father, Richard Carter, once a strong, charismatic businessman, now a shadow of the man he used to be. The silk fabric still carried the warmth of his embrace from earlier that evening, a fragile reminder of the love they once shared. Her gaze fell to the silver tiara resting beside her. He had placed it on her head just hours ago, smiling as he said, "No matter what happens, my princess, you'll always shine brighter than any crown." A lump formed in her throat. That moment already felt like a lifetime ago. From beyond her bedroom door, the muffled sound of raised voices broke through the storm's howling winds. Victoria, Emily's stepmother, always spoke in clipped, calculated tones, her words smooth as silk, but laced with poison. And tonight, she wasn't even trying to hide her contempt. A birthday dress? A tiara? For heaven's sake, Richard, she's not a little girl anymore. A pause, then her father's voice, weak, strained, but still protective. "She's just a child, Victoria. What she deserves is discipline." Victoria's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "While you sit here playing Father of the Year, everything you built is slipping through your fingers. You're too blind to see it, too weak to stop it." Emily shut her eyes tightly. Her father was sick, so sick. She had watched helplessly as his hands trembled more each day. His voice grew weaker, his once commanding presence fading into exhaustion. The doctors were baffled, but Emily had noticed something no one else seemed to question: Victoria's sudden interest in preparing his nightly tea. The pieces didn't fit together. Not yet. But deep down, Emily sensed something was terribly wrong. Then, a sound at the door. Slowly the handle turned. Emily sat up, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The door creaked open, revealing a slender silhouette against the dim hallway light. Victoria Carter stood there, smiling. Her beauty had always been deceiving. Soft golden waves of hair, flawless skin, an effortless elegance that masked the calculating mind behind it. But Emily had learned that Victoria's smiles weren't real. They were weapons, and right now that smile was sharper than ever. "My dear," she purred, stepping into the room, "you've been hiding away all evening. Didn't you enjoy your birthday?" Emily nodded automatically, though her hands clutched at the dress in her lap. Victoria's gaze swept over the room, the untouched cake, the pile of unopened books, the tiara shimmering in the faint glow of the bedside lamp. She reached out, picking up the tiara between her fingers, turning it slowly as if inspecting a meaningless trinket. "You know," she mused, her voice silk smooth, "when I was your age, I didn't have things like this. No one pampered me. No one treated me like a princess." Emily didn't reply. Victoria turned the tiara in her hands one last time before setting it back down, then leaned in slightly. Her voice dropped to a whisper, gentle, almost kind, yet beneath it lurked something dangerous. "How about a little adventure tonight?" she murmured. Emily blinked. "What?" Victoria's smile widened. "Just the two of us," she continued, brushing an invisible speck of dust off the sleeve of Emily's dress. "A special surprise." Emily frowned. Outside, lightning split the sky, casting jagged shadows across Victoria's perfect features. "It's late," Emily hesitated, "and it's storming." Victoria chuckled, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind Emily's ear. "That's what makes it exciting," she whispered. Then, tilting her head, she added, "Unless you're afraid." Emily stiffened. She wasn't afraid, but something inside her screamed not to go. Then she thought of her father, weak, sick, struggling just to stay awake. If she refused, Victoria would twist the story, make her seem ungrateful, difficult. Her father didn't need any more stress. Emily swallowed hard and forced a small smile. Okay. Victoria's fingers ghosted over the tiara one last time before she turned toward the door. Good girl, she whispered. Now grab your coat. We're going for a ride. Emily slid off the bed, reaching for her jacket, trying to ignore the icy chill creeping into her bones. Outside, the storm raged on. She had no idea that this would be the last time she would step foot in Willow's estate as the girl she was. The night air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement as Victoria Carter led Emily down the grand staircase of Willow's estate. The storm outside had grown fiercer, its wind rattling the tall windows and sending shadows flickering along the marble floors. Emily pulled her coat tighter around her small frame, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the uneasy feeling curling deep in her stomach. Victoria's heels clicked against the polished floors, the sound measured, confident, rehearsed. She carried herself like a woman in complete control, her elegant dress draping flawlessly over her frame as she moved with purpose toward the front door. Emily hesitated as they reached the entrance. Maybe we should wait until morning, she murmured. It's really stormy. And Dad... Victoria turned to face her, tilting her head slightly, the way she always did when she wanted to make Emily feel small. Your father is sleeping, sweetheart, she said, her voice as smooth as silk. And I promised him I'd do something special for you tonight. Surely you wouldn't want to disappoint him. Emily's throat tightened. That was how Victoria worked, always framing things in a way that made it seem like saying no would be a betrayal. Like resisting would mean hurting someone she loved. She had done it for years, weaving subtle manipulations into every conversation, until Emily could no longer tell if she was making her own choices or simply following along to avoid confrontation. She swallowed hard and nodded. Okay. Victoria's smile widened, triumphant. She reached for the heavy front doors and pulled them open, revealing the black luxury car waiting in the driveway. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, casting a silvery sheen across the pavement as the estate's outdoor lanterns flickered in the wind. Emily slid into the passenger seat as Victoria settled in behind the wheel, adjusting the mirrors with delicate precision. The moment the door shut, the warmth of the house was replaced by a cold silence. The leather seats were cool against Emily's skin as she buckled herself in, the faint scent of Victoria's expensive perfume lingering in the air. The car rumbled to life. Victoria pulled onto the long, winding driveway, her grip firm on the wheel. At first, the drive felt normal, comforting even. They passed familiar roads, streetlights casting long golden streaks across the rain-slick asphalt. Emily stared out the window, watching houses blur past, their warm lights glowing softly behind thick curtains. For a moment, she let herself believe Victoria really had planned a surprise. Maybe a late-night treat, maybe a place her father had mentioned. Maybe her stomach dropped. The streets were changing. The well-manicured neighborhoods had faded into unfamiliar roads, and soon those too had disappeared. The glow of civilization was shrinking behind them, replaced by long stretches of empty fields, abandoned warehouses, and crumbling fences. Emily shifted in her seat. Where are we going? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victoria didn't answer right away. Her hands gripped the wheel a little tighter, her posture still poised. But there was something different now, something calculated in the way she kept her eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. Emily's pulse quickened. Victoria? Victoria sighed dramatically. Emily, must you always ask so many questions? The response was meant to dismiss her, to make her feel silly, but it only made Emily more alert. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned to look out the window again. Nothing but open land, no houses, no lights, no people. Something was wrong. She forced a laugh, trying to mask the nervous edge creeping into her voice. This isn't really a birthday surprise, is it? Victoria's lips curved into a smirk, but her eyes remained locked on the road. No, sweetheart, she said. It's not. A chill spread through Emily's limbs. She unbuckled her seatbelt, her fingers shaking slightly as she reached for the door handle. Locked. Victoria let out a soft, amused chuckle. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she said. I knew you'd figure it out eventually. You're smarter than you look. Emily's breath came faster. What are you doing? Victoria finally turned to look at her, and for the first time, there was no pretense, no warmth, no carefully practiced charm, just cold, quiet indifference. I'm getting rid of a problem, she said simply. Emily's body went rigid. A problem. She felt the blood drain from her face as realization settled in like ice. Victoria had never wanted her. Dad, Emily started, her voice cracking. Victoria rolled her eyes. Your father is too sick to do anything now, and soon he won't be around at all. Emily's chest constricted. You're lying. Am I? Victoria said, arching an eyebrow. Let's think about it, Emily. Your father's mysterious illness, the way he gets weaker every day. And who takes care of him? Who brings him his tea? Who makes sure he gets just the right amount of medicine? She let the words hang in the air, as if savoring the weight of them. Really, sweetheart, it was only a matter of time. Emily's breath came in short, uneven gasps. Her father, he wasn't just sick, he was being poisoned. She had to get out. She lunged for the door handle again, yanking at it with all her strength. But Victoria was faster. With a sharp swerve of the wheel, she sent the car veering off the road. The tires screeched against gravel, the headlights illuminating a stretch of muddy terrain filled with piles of discarded metal, broken furniture, and mountains of trash. Emily barely had time to brace herself before the car skidded to a stop. The moment Victoria threw it into park, she unbuckled her seatbelt and reached across Emily, grabbing her by the arm with a grip like iron. Emily fought back, twisting, kicking, trying to pull away, but Victoria was stronger than she looked. Let me go! Emily screamed, panic surging through her. Victoria yanked the passenger door open. The storm had picked up again, the rain coming down in heavy sheets, the wind howling through the desolate wasteland. The air smelled of rotting garbage and damp earth, and the ground beneath them was slick with mud. Victoria leaned in, her breath warm against Emily's ear. No one is coming for you, she whispered, and with that, she shoved Emily out of the car. Emily hit the ground hard, her hands sinking into the cold, wet sludge of the landfill. Pain shot through her knees, but she barely registered it. She scrambled to her feet just in time to see the car door slam shut. Victoria didn't hesitate. She put the car in reverse, tires spinning in the mud before the sleek, black vehicle sped off into the night, leaving Emily alone in the darkness. The taillights disappeared over the hill, swallowed by the storm. Emily was alone. The rain pounded against her skin, soaking through her clothes, sending chills deep into her bones. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. She turned in frantic circles, her eyes searching for something, anything, besides the endless piles of trash and rusting debris. No lights, no people, no way out. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the sheer vastness of the landfill around her. The wind howled like a predator, and in that moment, it truly sank in. Victoria had done it. She had abandoned her here to die. The cold seeped into Emily's bones as she sat curled against a mound of discarded trash, her arms wrapped tightly around herself in a desperate attempt to keep warm. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps, visible in the frigid night air as the rain continued its merciless assault. Her thin coat was soaked through, her hair clinging to her face in wet strands. Every inch of her body ached from the fall, from the cold, from the sheer exhaustion that threatened to pull her under. But she couldn't let herself give in. Not here, not now. Somewhere in the distance, the storm rumbled like a living thing, growling low and deep as lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the endless piles of waste around her. The landfill stretched far in every direction, a wasteland of broken things, discarded furniture, shattered glass, rusting metal, torn fabric fluttering weakly in the wind. It was like she had been dropped into another world. Her fingers dug into the damp fabric of her coat as she fought back the sob threatening to escape her throat. She couldn't cry. Crying wouldn't help. She had to think. She had to move. Slowly, she shifted her weight, forcing herself to stand despite the sharp protest of her muscles. The mud squelched beneath her sneakers as she took a hesitant step forward. Her legs trembled from the cold. from fear, from the realization that she had no idea where to go. There were no lights, no roads, no signs of life, just darkness and the ever-present stench of rot. Then, a sound. Her breath hitched. Footsteps, faint, uneven, crunching against the damp ground. Someone was there. Emily went rigid, her heart slamming against her ribs. Her mind screamed at her to hide, but there was nowhere to go. She pressed herself against a pile of discarded wooden planks, holding her breath, ears straining against the storm. The footsteps grew closer. A shadow moved through the darkness. Then a voice, low, rough, but surprisingly gentle. "Who's there?" Emily didn't move. A beam of light cut through the darkness, sweeping over the trashy-strewn ground. It landed inches from her, and before she could think, she shrank back further, pressing herself into the cold, damp debris. The flashlight hovered for a second. Then it moved again, revealing the figure holding it. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his silhouette slightly hunched against the rain. He wore an old weathered jacket, his jeans stained with mud, his boots caked with dirt. His face was lined with exhaustion, his beard unkempt, his dark eyes sharp despite the weariness in them. Emily's stomach clenched. He didn't look like a threat, but she knew better than to trust appearances. The man took a cautious step forward, lowering the flashlight slightly. His voice softened. "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you." Emily said nothing. He sighed, glancing around as if checking to see if someone else was there. When he looked back at her, his brow furrowed. "Kid, you shouldn't be out here." Emily pressed her lips together. She wasn't sure if it was the cold or the fear that made it impossible to speak. The man crouched slightly, keeping a careful distance, his voice quieter now. "You're shaking. If you stay out in this weather, you'll get sick. I've got a place nearby. It's not much, but it's dry and warm." Emily's pulse pounded. She wanted to run, but where? She had no idea which direction led back to civilization, and even if she did, she had no strength left to make it. She glanced at the man again. His hands were rough but steady, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Something in his posture, in the way he didn't move too fast or too close, told her he wasn't trying to scare her. Still, she hesitated. The man exhaled through his nose, looking up at the sky as another roll of thunder shook the air. "Look, kid, I don't know what happened to you, and I won't ask. But I can tell you this. If you stay out here all night, you're not going to make it. You need food, dry clothes, somewhere safe, even just for a little while." He stood slowly, backing away just enough to give her space. "It's your choice, but if you want help, I'll be over there." Emily watched as he turned and began walking away, his boots squelching against the wet ground. She hesitated only a second longer before her body made the choice for her. Her legs, weak and shaking, moved forward. The man didn't turn as she caught up, but she could tell by the small nod of his head that he had expected her to follow. They walked in silence, weaving through the uneven terrain of the landfill until they reached a makeshift shelter, tucked away beneath a cluster of rusted-out cars. It wasn't a house, not really, but it was something. A small wooden structure patched together with salvaged materials, its roof covered with a tarp that flapped lightly in the wind. A faint glow of warm light flickered inside from an old lantern. The man pulled open the door, stepping inside first. "It's not much," he muttered, shaking the rain from his jacket, "but it's dry." Emily hesitated at the entrance. The air inside was musty but not unpleasant, carrying the scent of old wood, books, and something warm. Tea, maybe. The man rummaged through a small pile of belongings before pulling out a worn, folded blanket. He held it out to her without a word. Emily stared at it for a long moment before slowly reaching out and taking it. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Instead, he turned to an old stove in the corner, lighting it with practiced ease. A small pot sat on top, steam already beginning to rise from it. "Tea," he said simply, as if reading her thoughts. "Nothing fancy, but it'll warm you up." Emily clutched the blanket tighter around herself as she sat down, exhaustion pressing down on her like a weight. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to exhale. The storm still raged outside. The night was still dark and uncertain. But for now, at least for this moment, she was not alone. The warmth of the tea seeped through Emily's cold, trembling hands as she sat in the dimly lit shelter, the rough wool blanket draped over her shoulders. She curled into it, letting the warmth spread through her aching limbs. But the chill inside her remained. The fear, the betrayal, the reality of what had just happened. She was still struggling to accept it, how quickly her world had shattered. Only hours ago she had been in her bedroom, clutching the birthday dress her father had given her. And now she was here, in a stranger's makeshift home, surrounded by walls patched together from salvaged wood and metal, sitting on a worn-out mattress covered with old quilts. Jack sat across from her, stirring his tea with slow, steady movements. The fire from the old stove flickered, casting shadows on his face. The face of a man who had seen too much, carried too much. He didn't ask questions. He hadn't pushed her to talk. But now, as the silence stretched between them, she knew he was waiting. Emily took a shaky breath. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "My stepmother tried to kill me." Jack didn't flinch. He just nodded, as if he already knew. "Go on." Emily swallowed hard, staring into the cup in her hands. "She drove me out here, left me in the landfill. I don't think she expected anyone to find me." She hesitated, then added, "And she's poisoning my dad." Jack set his cup down, his gaze sharpening. Emily forced herself to meet his eyes. "She's been slipping something into his tea. He's getting weaker every day. I think she's waiting for him to die so she can take everything." A muscle tightened in Jack's jaw. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Your father," he said carefully. "What's his name?" She hesitated. "Richard Carter." The reaction was immediate. Jack went still. The light from the fire flickered across his face, but his expression had darkened, his eyes distant, haunted by something long buried. His fingers curled slightly, as if grasping at a memory just out of reach. Emily frowned. Do you know him?" Jack exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face before looking back at her. "Yeah, kid," he said, his voice lower now. "I knew him, a long time ago." Emily's pulse quickened. Jack leaned back, staring past her, lost in thought. "We were best friends once. College roommates. We had big dreams back then. Thought we were going to change the world." He let out a dry chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "Your dad, he always had a way of seeing the best in people. He wanted to build something meaningful, something that mattered." He paused, shaking his head. "Me? I wanted money, power. I wanted to be at the top, no matter the cost." Emily watched him closely. There was something heavy in his voice, in the way he said those words, like he had lived with their weight for far too long. Jack let out a slow breath. "I got what I wanted. For a while. I climbed fast, made a fortune. But when you only care about winning, you don't realize how much you're losing along the way." His voice hardened. "I lost people. People who mattered. And by the time I figured it out, I had nothing left." He gestured around the small shelter. "So I walked away, left it all behind, came out here, where no one knew me, where no one expected anything from me." He glanced at her. "Until tonight." Emily's mind was spinning. This man, this stranger who had found her in the darkness, had once been her father's best friend? It felt impossible. And yet, as she looked at him now, she realized she recognized something in him. Her father had always spoken about a friend from his past, someone he had lost touch with over the years, someone he had once trusted like a brother. Jack Lawson. Emily swallowed hard. "If you knew him, then you know he doesn't deserve this. He's a good man." Jack's gaze met hers, something unreadable flickering behind his tired eyes. "Yeah," he murmured. "He is." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft crackling of the fire. Then Jack straightened, his voice turning firm. "She's not going to win, kid. We're not going to let her." Emily's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Jack's expression hardened. "I mean, I walked away from a lot of things in my life. I let people down. I lost good people because I didn't fight hard enough to keep them. But this?" He shook his head. "Not this time." He stood, rolling his shoulders, as if shaking off the weight of the past. You want to save your dad? He asked. Emily nodded. More than anything. Jack grabbed his coat. Then we start now. The wind had died down, leaving behind a thick, suffocating silence. The storm had passed, but the weight of what lay ahead settled heavy in the air. Jack stood near the entrance of the shelter, rolling his shoulders, deep in thought. The small lantern flickered beside him, casting shadows across the weathered lines of his face. He had spent years avoiding the past, but now fate had dragged him back into a world he thought he had left behind. Emily sat on the old mattress, still wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victoria's cold smile, heard the car door slam, felt the rain soaking through her clothes as she screamed for help. But there had been no help. Victoria had made sure of that. Not this time. Emily sat up straighter. You said we start now, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. How? Jack pulled out an old beat-up phone from his coat pocket. He ran a hand over his face before dialing a number he hadn't called in years. Ben Miller, he muttered under his breath, half to himself. If anyone can dig up dirt on Victoria, it's him. Emily frowned. Who's Ben Miller? Jack pressed the phone to his ear and gave her a sidelong glance. A guy who's made a living uncovering people's darkest secrets. The call rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Who the hell is this? Jack smirked. That's a real warm welcome, Ben. There was a long pause, then a slow exhale. Well, Jack Lawson. Thought you were dead. Jack leaned against the wooden frame of the shelter, his fingers drumming against the old phone. Not yet, but I've got a situation that might put me there if I don't play it right. Emily watched as Jack's posture shifted. The exhaustion in his face disappeared, replaced by something sharper. A man stepping back into the life he once knew, a man preparing for a fight. I need your help, Jack said, cutting straight to the point. There's a woman named Victoria Carter. She's poisoning her husband, Richard Carter, and she just tried to kill his daughter. His voice darkened. I need proof. Something to take her down. Ben let out a low whistle. You don't ask for small favors, do you? Never did. There was another pause before Ben finally spoke. I'll see what I can find, but I need time. Jack's grip on the phone tightened. I don't have time. Ben sighed. All right. I'll pull what I can. Send me everything you know. Jack ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Who's next? Emily asked. Sam Harper, Jack said as the phone rang. Tech genius. If there's a digital trail, he'll find it. The phone clicked. Jack? Jack smirked. Still hacking into government files for fun, Sam? A chuckle. That was one time, maybe twice. I need you to crack into some security feeds. Willow's estate. Victoria Carter. Whatever you can get me. A low whistle came through the line. Big name. Expensive estate. That kind of security isn't easy to bypass. You're not getting cold feet on me, are you? Sam scoffed. Please, give me an hour. Jack ended the call and turned to Emily. All right, kid, your turn. Emily sat up, gripping the blanket tighter. What do you need? Everything you can tell me about Willow's estate, Jack said. Security codes, cameras, Victoria's routine, anything that can help us get in without her knowing. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to think through the haze of exhaustion. She had lived in that house her whole life. She knew every corner, every locked door, every hiding place. The front gates have a code, she started. Dad changed it every few months, but Victoria always made sure she knew it first. The last one I remember was 4173. Jack nodded, jotting it down in an old notebook. There are cameras at the main entrance, the back patio, and one in my dad's study. Emily continued, but the one in the east hallway hasn't worked in months. Victoria kept saying she'd get it fixed, but she never did. Jack's eyes flickered with approval. That's good. That's something we can use. Emily hesitated, then lowered her voice. My dad has a safe in his office, behind the bookshelf. Jack raised an eyebrow. What's in it? I don't know, Emily admitted, but I know he always said that if anything ever happened to him, that safe had everything I needed to prove the truth. Jack exhaled. Then we're getting into that safe. Before Emily could respond, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Sam. That was fast, Jack muttered, answering. Tell me you have something. Sam's voice was tense. Jack, you're not gonna like this. Jack straightened. What? The Willows Estate security just flagged an outgoing call. Victoria's been in contact with a lawyer, and she's moving fast. Jack's jaw clenched. How fast? She's filing new paperwork. Power of attorney. If she gets Carter to sign, she gets everything. Emily's stomach dropped. Jack ended the call, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then finally, he turned to Emily. We don't have days, he said. We have hours. Emily's pulse pounded. Then we have to go now. Jack shook his head. You're not going anywhere near that house. It's too dangerous. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but Jack raised a hand. Number, I need you safe. I need you out of sight. He reached for his coat and pulled out a small slip of paper, scribbling down an address. You're going to stay with Martha Evans. She's a retired nurse. Used to work for the Carter family years ago. If your dad makes it out, she'll be the one to take care of him. Emily hesitated. But, Jack met her gaze. You want to help your dad? Then trust me. Let me handle this. Emily swallowed hard. Every part of her wanted to fight, to be there, to do something. But she knew Jack was right. If Victoria found out she was alive, everything would fall apart. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're gonna save him, kid. But you have to let me do this my way. Emily nodded, even though it hurt. Jack grabbed his coat, his expression dark, determined. We end this tonight. The night was silent, thick with tension. Willow's estate stood against the darkness, its towering walls and elegant windows concealing secrets beneath its polished exterior. From a distance, it looked like nothing had changed, like it was still the grand home of Richard Carter, a man once full of life, of ambition, of warmth. But inside, a sickness festered, poisoning both his body and the very foundation of his legacy. Jack crouched behind a cluster of trees along the perimeter, his breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The cold metal of his earpiece pressed against his skin as Sam's voice crackled through the line. You're clear, Sam murmured. Camera feeds are looped. You have exactly 10 minutes before the system resets. Jack didn't hesitate. He moved. With practiced ease, he scaled the side gate, landing soundlessly on the other side. The damp grass muffled his footsteps as he slipped through the shadows, weaving between hedges and decorative stone pathways. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. He had spent years running from the kind of life that required breaking into places like this. Now he was running straight toward it. The mansion loomed ahead. Jack pressed his back against the cold brick wall, his fingers brushing against the worn leather gloves covering his hands. He peered around the corner, 2 guards patrolling near the entrance. He exhaled slowly. Timing was everything. Ben, Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. A second later, static buzzed in his earpiece. Then, a piercing alarm split through the night. Both guards flinched, turning toward the sudden disturbance coming from the east wing. Jack smirked. Right on cue. Without another second wasted, he darted toward the side entrance. The old servant's door was exactly where Emily had said it would be, hidden beneath ivy, rusting at the hinges from years of neglect. He pulled out a small tool from his pocket and worked the lock with quick, precise movements. A soft click. Jack slipped inside. The air was stale, laced with the faint scent of expensive wood polish and something more insidious. The lingering bitterness of poison. Moving through the dim hallway, he kept low, every sense on high alert. The grand chandeliers above cast eerie patterns against the marble floors, the estate's vast silence amplifying the sound of his own heartbeat. Richard Carter's study was on the 2nd floor. That's where the truth was waiting. Jack made his way up the staircase, pressing against the banister each time he heard the distant click of Victoria's heels on the other side of the house. The moment he reached the study, he shut the door softly behind him and got to work. Emily had been right. The room smelled of tea, but not the comforting kind. No, this scent carried something darker, something off. Jack spotted the ornate silver tea set resting on a tray near the fireplace, the delicate china almost mocking in its beauty. He didn't need a lab test to know this was the weapon Victoria had been using. Jack pulled out a small vial and carefully poured some of the remaining liquid inside, sealing it tight. Evidence. Proof. Then he turned his attention to the bookshelf. Emily had told him about the safe, hidden behind the rows of neatly arranged books, tucked away beneath a painting. His fingers traced the spine of an old leather-bound novel, and with a slight pull, the entire section shifted. Bingo! A sleek steel safe gleamed in the dim light. Jack reached for his tools. "Sam," he whispered. "Already on it," Sam replied, the sound of rapid typing coming through the earpiece. "It's a digital lock. Give me a sec." Jack listened as Sam worked, his eyes flicking to the study door every few seconds. The mansion was too quiet now. Finally, the safe beeped. The lock clicked open. Jack pulled the door wide and scanned the contents inside. Stacks of documents, folders, and there, a thick envelope bearing Richard Carter's signature. Jack flipped it open, his eyes scanning the neatly typed words. Financial statements, wire transfers, shell accounts, fraud. Victoria hadn't just been poisoning her husband. She had been draining him dry, funneling his fortune into secret accounts under her name. Jack grabbed everything. Then from the corner of his eye, he caught something else. A handwritten letter. The ink was smudged, the writing faint, but Jack recognized the shaky strokes of a man losing his strength. "If anything happens to me, this is my truth. My legacy belongs to my daughter. I was blinded for too long. If you are reading this, I hope it's not too late." Jack's throat tightened. Richard had known. He had known, but he had been too weak to fight. Jack stuffed the papers into his jacket. "I have everything," he whispered. "I'm getting out." Static crackled. Then, Ben's voice sharp with urgency. "Jack, get out, now!" Jack tensed. "What?" "The system is coming back online ahead of schedule. Someone's messing with it." Before Ben could finish, Jack heard the click of heels just outside the door. Victoria. Jack moved fast, slipping behind the large velvet curtains, framing the tall windows just as the door swung open. He held his breath. Through the thin fabric, he could see Victoria Carter standing in the doorway, bathed in soft candlelight. She was calm, too calm. Her fingers trailed along the desk, her nails tapping lightly against the wood. Then, she turned her head slightly, as if sensing something. Jack stayed perfectly still. Finally, she sighed and walked toward the tea set, lifting the porcelain teacup. Her lips curled into a small smile. Then, as if satisfied, she turned and left the room. Jack waited exactly 10 seconds before moving. He slipped out the window onto the narrow ledge, his breath steady as he climbed down the side of the house. The documents pressed against his chest. As soon as his feet hit the ground, he whispered, "I'm out." Sam exhaled in relief. "Get back here, now!" Jack didn't waste another second. He disappeared into the darkness, his pulse still hammering. This was it. They had proof. Now it was time to bring Victoria Carter down. Meanwhile, across town, in a small, quiet house tucked away on the edge of the city, Emily stood before a mirror, adjusting the stiff white coat Martha Evans had given her. The retired nurse watched her carefully, her sharp blue eyes taking in every detail. "Remember," Martha said, tightening her own coat, "you don't speak unless necessary. You let me do the talking." Emily nodded, her stomach twisting. "Are you sure this will work?" Martha adjusted the fake ID clipped to Emily's coat pocket. "Victoria will expect a medical team to monitor Richard's condition. That's our way in." Emily swallowed hard. "And once we're inside?" Martha's gaze was steady. "We get your father out." The plan was set. By sunrise, Victoria Carter wouldn't know what hit her. The morning air was crisp, the early light barely breaking through the gray clouds that loomed over Willow's estate. Emily sat in the passenger seat of Martha's old sedan, her fingers twisting anxiously in her lap. The borrowed white coat felt stiff on her shoulders. The medical mask, the medical cap, the non-prescription glasses. The medical badge clipped to her pocket, foreign and unnatural. She had spent her whole life in this house, yet today she was walking into enemy territory. Martha turned onto the long driveway, her expression calm, professional. "Steady your breathing, sweetheart," she murmured. "Nervous hands and darting eyes will give you away." Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to sit still. The mansion grew larger as they approached, its towering windows dark and watchful. She are no longer the owner here. She was an intruder. As the car came to a stop, the heavy front doors opened, and Victoria Carter stepped out. Emily's stomach twisted. Victoria was the picture of poise, her silk robe tied neatly at the waist, her hair styled in perfect waves as if she had stepped out of a magazine instead of a house filled with secrets. Her eyes, cold and calculating, flicked between the two of them as they exited the car. Martha moved first, adjusting the bag of medical supplies over her shoulder. "Mrs. Carter," she greeted smoothly, her voice warm but authoritative. "I'm Nurse Evans, sent by Dr. Green for a follow-up evaluation of your husband." Victoria arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "Dr. Green no longer oversees my husband's care." Martha didn't blink. "He's still reviewing Mr. Carter's previous medical records. Given the complexity of his condition, he asked that I personally conduct a new assessment." She gestured to Emily. "My assistant Claire will be assisting with vitals and documentation." Victoria's gaze flickered to Emily. The moment stretched unbearably long as those sharp eyes raked over her, searching for cracks. Emily kept her face neutral, remembering Martha's advice. "You don't look away. You don't fidget. You don't speak unless necessary." Finally, Victoria sighed, stepping back. "Very well, but be quick about it." She turned on her heel, leading them through the grand entrance. The familiar scent of polished wood and expensive perfume filled the air, but beneath it, something darker lingered, the faint bitterness of poison. Emily fought the urge to gag. They followed Victoria through the hallways, the house eerily silent, no staff, no movement, just the distant tick of the antique grandfather clock echoing through the marble floors. And then they reached the bedroom. Victoria pushed the door open, stepping aside with a careless wave of her hand. "There he is." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her father lay against the oversized pillows, his once strong frame now frail, sunken, barely more than a ghost of the man he used to be. His skin was ashen, his breathing shallow. The light in his eyes, the warmth she had grown up with, was nearly gone. She had known he was sick. She had known Victoria had been poisoning him. But seeing it, it was so much worse. Martha moved first, keeping up the act. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, setting down her bag and taking out a stethoscope. "I'm here to check on you." Richard stirred slightly, his lips parting, but no sound came out. Emily clenched her fists. Victoria had done this to him. Martha leaned in, her fingers checking his pulse, her movements calm and professional. But Emily saw the flicker of urgency in her eyes. Too slow. His heartbeat was too slow. She turned to Victoria. "Has he eaten anything in the last 12 hours? Victoria crossed her arms, looking entirely uninterested. "I gave him his tea, as always." Martha's jaw tensed. Emily knew what that meant. More poison, more control. She needed to act. She took a small notepad from her coat pocket, pretending to jot down notes. Instead, she scribbled a message, her fingers tight around the pen. "He's dying. We have to move fast." Martha only needed a quick glance at the words before nodding subtly. "We'll need to draw some blood to check for abnormalities," Martha said, reaching for a syringe. "Standard procedure." Victoria sighed, rolling her eyes. "Fine. Just don't waste my time." Emily kept her expression neutral, but inside her heart raced. They had minutes, maybe even seconds, to figure out their next move. Across town, in a dimly lit back room, Jack studied the vial of tea he had taken from the estate. The faint scent of herbs was barely detectable beneath the bitterness. Sam hunched over his laptop, running a scan through a medical database. "This isn't just any poison," he murmured. "It's a slow-acting compound designed to mimic natural organ failure." Ben frowned. "How much longer does he have?" Sam exhaled sharply. "If she's increased the dosage, hours at best." Jack's grip tightened around the edge of the table. He had spent years walking away from things that mattered. But not this. He grabbed his coat. "We're out of time." The air in Richard Carter's bedroom was thick with tension, the kind that made the walls seem to close in. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as she sat stiffly beside her father's bed, watching Victoria pace near the window, impatience flickering in her sharp eyes. Any minute now, her lawyer would arrive. Any minute now, she would have it all. Richard Carter, barely conscious, lay against the pillows, his breathing shallow. He didn't even know he was standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for Victoria to push him off. Martha stood on the other side of the room, calmly packing up their medical kit, her every move measured. But Emily knew the truth. Martha wasn't leaving. She was waiting. Victoria checked the time on her sleek gold watch and sighed dramatically. "This is taking too long," she muttered. She turned toward Emily and Martha with a disapproving glance. "Are you finished with your examination? Or are we planning to sit around all day?" Martha closed her bag with a practiced snap. "He needs immediate hospitalization," she said smoothly. "His vitals are dangerously low." Victoria's lips curled. "That won't be necessary." Emily's fingers dug into her notepad, struggling to keep her expression neutral. She wanted to scream, to shake her father awake, to tell him what was happening, but she couldn't. Not yet, because Jack was coming. And when he did, Victoria's carefully built house of lies would come crashing down. A knock at the door interrupted the heavy silence. Victoria's expression brightened, her whole demeanor shifting in an instant. "That must be Mr. Holloway," she said smoothly. "Finally." Emily's stomach twisted as Victoria strode to the door and pulled it open, revealing a tall man in an expensive gray suit, briefcase in hand, the lawyer. Behind him, another man followed, a doctor, or at least someone dressed like one. Emily knew better. The fake doctor. This was it. Victoria gave them a gracious smile, stepping aside to let them in. Right on time. The lawyer barely glanced at Richard before setting down his briefcase on the bedside table. "Let's get this signed," he said, already flipping through the paperwork. "We've drawn up the power of attorney as per your request." Mrs. Carter Victoria's eyes gleamed as she reached for a pen. And then the door slammed open. Everyone turned just as Jack stepped inside. He moved with the kind of confidence that turned heads, his sharp blue eyes sweeping over the room like he owned it. He wasn't dressed like a businessman, nor did he wear a badge of authority, but he carried something far more dangerous: evidence. Emily's breath caught. Victoria's entire body stiffened, but her expression barely faltered. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice controlled, but her grip on the pen tightened. Jack smirked, taking another step inside. "That's an interesting question," he said casually. "You see, once upon a time, I was Richard Carter's best friend." His eyes flickered toward Richard's frail body. "And since he can't stand up for himself right now, I figured I'd do it for him." The lawyer frowned. "Mrs. Carter, should I call security?" Victoria let out a forced laugh, stepping forward. "This is ridiculous. My husband is sick, and I will not tolerate some stranger waltzing in here." Jack raised his hand, and the room fell silent. "You really don't want to finish that sentence, Victoria," he said, his voice dangerously smooth. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small vial. He held it up between his fingers, letting the light catch the amber liquid inside. Emily saw it in Victoria's face, the flicker of real fear. Jack turned the vial slowly. "This is a sample of the tea you've been so generously serving Richard. You know, the one slowly shutting down his organs?" He looked at the fake doctor. "And I'm guessing you were here to make sure he didn't have much longer, right?" The so-called doctor paled. Jack's smirk widened. "Now that would be enough to land you in prison, Victoria. But here's where it gets worse for you." He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a folder of documents. "I took a little trip to your husband's study last night." He flipped open the folder. "Financial records, wire transfers, offshore accounts. Funny how all of them lead back to you." The lawyer's eyes darted between Jack and Victoria. "Mrs. Carter?" Victoria clenched her jaw, but she recovered quickly. She let out a cold, amused laugh. "You expect anyone to believe this?" she scoffed. "He broke into my home. I'll have him arrested for trespassing." Jack tilted his head. "Well, you could try." Then he stepped aside, and behind him 2 uniformed police officers strode into the room. The color drained from Victoria's face. "Victoria Carter," one of the officers said firmly, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit a felony." The lawyer took a step back. I had no knowledge of any of this," he stammered. Jack turned to him, his smirk sharp. "You sure about that?" Because I have a feeling the feds will love going through your emails. The lawyer went pale. Before he could protest, one of the officers grabbed his arm. You're coming with us too. Emily watched, her heart pounding, as everything unfolded like a perfectly timed play. Victoria was still standing there, still clinging to control, even as the officer grabbed her wrist and snapped the cuffs into place. You don't understand, she hissed, her voice laced with venom. I deserve this. I took care of him. Jack leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. You almost got away with it, he murmured, but you made one mistake. Victoria's lips trembled, fury flickering in her eyes. And what's that? Jack looked toward Emily. You underestimated the wrong girl. Victoria followed his gaze, and for the first time, her mask cracked completely. Emily didn't flinch. She held Victoria's gaze, unblinking, unafraid. And just like that, the power shifted. The officers led Victoria away, her protest growing fainter as they dragged her out of the room. The fake doctor followed, his face frozen in shock. The lawyer, looking sick to his stomach, stumbled after them. Then, silence. Emily let out a shaky breath. Jack turned to her. You okay? She looked at her father, still weak, still unmoving. But now he had a chance. She nodded. I will be. Jack exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. We should get him out of here. Martha was already at Richard's side, checking his vitals. He needs real care, now. Jack pulled out his phone. I'll call an ambulance. Emily stepped closer to her father, gently taking his hand. His fingers were cold, fragile. But as she squeezed them, she felt the faintest pressure in return. Her heart swelled. Her father was still in there. And now he was going to live. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The sirens faded into the distance, swallowed by the quiet hum of the early morning. The chaos of the past few hours had settled, leaving only the heavy weight of exhaustion hanging in the air. Emily sat beside her father's hospital bed, her fingers gripping his hand as if she could anchor him back to her. His breathing was steadier now, the gray pallor of his skin slowly retreating as the antidote did its work. But he was still too weak to speak, his eyes fluttering open only in brief moments before exhaustion pulled him back under. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had waited too long, fought too hard to crumble now. A warm hand settled on her shoulder. You should rest, Martha murmured. Emily shook her head. Not until he wakes up. Martha gave her a knowing smile, her sharp blue eyes softening. He will, sweetheart. He's stronger than he looks. Emily wanted to believe that, but the sight of her father, so fragile, so unlike the man she had always known, made it hard. She had spent so many nights fearing she would never see him again, that he would slip away before she could tell him the truth. She squeezed his hand a little tighter. I should have noticed sooner, she whispered. I should have done something. Martha knelt beside her, her voice gentle but firm. You were just a kid fighting against something no one else could see. And yet you saved him. She brushed a strand of Emily's hair behind her ear. Don't carry that guilt, honey. You did everything right. Emily let out a shaky breath, nodding, but the weight in her chest didn't fully lift. The door creaked open, and Jack stepped inside, his presence filling the small hospital room in a way that made it feel just a little safer. How's he doing? He asked. Martha stood, stretching her back. Vitals are improving. The antidote is working, but his body's still weak. It's going to take time. Jack nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets as his gaze landed on Richard. Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, regret, something heavier than words. Emily noticed. Have you talked to him yet? She asked softly. Jack's jaw tightened. He hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. Emily studied him. Jack Lawson, the man who had saved her life, who had stormed into her father's house and torn down the empire of lies Victoria had built, suddenly looked unsure. Come on, she said, standing. It's time. Jack didn't move. Martha, ever observant, folded her arms and gave him a pointed look. You've come this far, Jack. Don't run now. Jack let out a breath, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm not running, he muttered, but his feet stayed planted where they were. Emily stepped aside, leaving space next to the bed. "He still considers you his best friend, you know," she said, "even after everything." Jack's gaze snapped to hers, something unreadable in his eyes. Then slowly he moved forward, pulling up a chair beside the bed. For a long moment he just sat there, staring at the man he once knew. The man he had abandoned. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I'm sorry." The words felt too small for the weight they carried. Richard stirred. His fingers twitched beneath Emily's hand, and then, with a great effort, his eyes slowly opened. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. His gaze was unfocused at first, but as it swept the room, landing on each of them, something in him steadied. Recognition. "Dad," Emily choked out, gripping his hand. "You're okay." Richard blinked, his lips parting. His voice was hoarse, weak, but when he spoke, it was clear. "Emily?" A sob broke free before she could stop it, and she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his hand. "I thought I lost you." Richard's fingers curled around hers, feeble but determined. "You saved me," he rasped. Emily nodded, wiping at her tears, laughing breathlessly through the emotion clogging her throat. Then Richard's tired gaze shifted, falling on Jack. Jack held still, as if bracing for a blow, but Richard just stared at him for a long moment. Then, to Jack's complete shock, a faint smile pulled at the corners of his mouth. "Took you long enough," Richard murmured. Jack let out a small, breathless laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah," he admitted. "Yeah, it did." A silence settled over the room. Not tense, not heavy, but something lighter, something healing. Jack leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I should have been there," he said quietly. "All those years. I should have never left." Richard exhaled slowly. "You're here now." Jack swallowed hard, nodding. Emily watched them, her heart aching in the best way possible. She had spent so much of her life watching things fall apart, watching people leave, watching her father weaken under Victoria's grip. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was watching something come back together. Martha rested a hand on Emily's shoulder, squeezing gently. "Come on, sweetheart," she said. "Let's give them a minute." Emily hesitated, but Martha gave her a small smile. "You and I have some tea to make." Emily snorted softly. "As long as it's not Victoria's recipe." Martha chuckled. "Not a chance." They stepped out of the room together, leaving Jack and Richard alone. And as Emily walked beside Martha, she felt it. For the first time in forever, she wasn't alone. She had her father back. She had a protector in Jack. And in Martha, she had something she had never known before. A mother. The afternoon sun cast golden light through the hospital room window, warming the small space where Richard sat propped up against his pillows. His face, once pale and sunken, had regained color. His strength was returning, little by little. But the greatest transformation wasn't physical. It was the fire in his eyes, a quiet determination that had been missing for too long. Jack leaned against the window frame, arms crossed, watching his old friend with a smirk. "You look better," he said. Richard chuckled, though his voice was still hoarse. Anything's an improvement after nearly being poisoned to death. His eyes flickered to Emily, who sat beside him, curled up in the chair like she never wanted to leave his side. "But I have someone to thank for that." Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. "We both do," she said, glancing at Jack. Jack shook his head. "Nah, you were the one who fought for him. I just showed up when you needed backup." Richard studied him for a long moment. "Maybe, but we both know showing up isn't something you used to do." Jack looked away, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, well, maybe it's time I change that." A comfortable silence stretched between them before Richard finally sighed, his expression growing serious. "I've spent my whole life building a business," he said, "trying to create something that would last. But it turns out, money and success don't mean much when you trust the wrong people." Emily looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. "It wasn't your fault." Richard gave her a small smile. "Maybe not, but I was blind to what was happening right in front of me. And because of that, you suffered." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I can't change the past, sweetheart, but I can make sure no other child goes through what you did. Jack straightened slightly, intrigued. What are you thinking? Richard's gaze sharpened. A foundation, he said. One that helps children in dangerous situations. Kids who have nowhere else to turn. We can use my resources to give them safety, legal aid, a way out. Jack exhaled, nodding slowly. Not a bad idea. Richard raised an eyebrow. And I was hoping you'd help me run it. Jack blinked, caught off guard. Me? Richard smirked. You've already been doing the work, helping people, looking out for those who've been cast aside. And let's be honest, you were never the type to sit behind a desk. Jack let out a short laugh. Yeah, can't argue with that. He rubbed his jaw, considering it. The idea of stepping back into the world he had left behind was unsettling. But this wasn't about profit or power. This was about doing something that mattered. Emily sat forward suddenly, excitement flashing in her eyes. Can we build a library? Both men turned to her. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. A place where kids can go, where they can escape, even just for a little while. Stories helped me when I felt alone. Maybe they could help someone else too. Jack grinned. You want to save the world with books, huh? Emily shrugged, but there was a quiet certainty in her voice. Stories give people hope, and sometimes that's enough. Richard chuckled, ruffling her hair. Then we'll build the best library anyone's ever seen. Martha entered the room just in time to hear that last part, a tray of tea in her hands. Did I hear something about a library? Jack smirked. Emily's first official act as director of creative ideas. Martha set the tray down, her gaze warm. I think it's a wonderful idea. Emily beamed, already imagining the rows of books, the cozy reading corners, the safe space they could create for children who needed it most. And just like that, New Dawn Foundation was born. Weeks passed, and what started as an idea quickly became a reality. Richard and Jack poured their efforts into launching the foundation, using every resource at their disposal. Word spread fast. Former business associates, local philanthropists, even community leaders. People wanted to help. Within a month, the foundation had secured funding, a location, and a growing team of advocates. They connected with social workers, legal experts, and counselors, ensuring that children trapped in unsafe environments had somewhere to turn. And the library? That was Emily's personal project. With Jack's connections and Richard's funding, she designed a space filled with warm lighting, soft chairs, and shelves stacked with books, carefully chosen for kids like her. Kids who needed hope. She spent her afternoons picking out titles, organizing donations, and watching something beautiful take shape. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. Emily found it on her desk, tucked between a stack of books. The envelope was simple, her name scrawled across the front in careful handwriting. She opened it and read, Dear Emily, my name is Anna. I'm 12 years old. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I needed to write it anyway. Before the foundation helped me and my dad, I thought we were alone. I thought no one would believe us, that we would never escape. But we did. Because of you. Mr. Jack told me your story. He said you were brave, that you never gave up. I want to be brave too. I hope one day I can help someone the way you helped me. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for showing me that there's always a way out. Your friend Anna Emily stared at the words, her vision blurring. Martha walked in a moment later, pausing when she saw the expression on Emily's face. Sweetheart? Emily swallowed hard and handed her the letter. Martha read it quietly, then smiled, wrapping an arm around Emily's shoulders. You see, she murmured, you're already changing lives. Emily wiped her eyes, a quiet determination settling in her chest. This was only the beginning. The day had finally arrived. Emily stood at the entrance of the New Dawn Foundation, staring up at the beautifully restored building. Just a few months ago, this place had been nothing more than an idea, a desperate dream born from pain and survival. Now it was real. The doors would soon open to children who needed safety, hope, and a second chance. A nervous energy hummed in her chest as she smoothed out the folds of her soft blue dress. It wasn't fancy, but it felt right. She wasn't here to be a princess in a castle. She was here to be something stronger. Richard stood beside her, looking healthier than he had in years. The deep lines on his face weren't from sickness anymore, but from life, from fighting his way back. Jack was on her other side, hands in his pockets, his usual smirk replaced with something softer, something proud. Martha stood close too, her warm presence a steady anchor in the whirlwind of emotions running through Emily's heart. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Richard asked. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. She nodded, more than ever. The small ceremony began with speeches. Local officials, supporters of the foundation, and members of the community spoke about the importance of giving children a safe place, a way out, a future. And then it was Emily's turn. She walked up to the microphone, her heart hammering. The crowd was full of strangers, but she wasn't afraid, because she wasn't that scared little girl anymore. She took a deep breath and began. "When I was younger, I thought being a princess meant wearing a crown and living in a castle," she said, her voice steady. "I thought it meant someone would always be there to protect me. But life doesn't always work that way." She looked out at the faces before her, letting the words come from her heart. "I lost my mother when I was little. I almost lost my father too. I learned that not everyone who smiles at you wants to help you, and for a long time I thought I was alone." She swallowed, glancing at Richard, then Jack, then Martha. "But I wasn't. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that true strength isn't about how much power you have. It's about how much you're willing to fight for the people you love. It's about helping others even when you're scared, even when the odds are against you." She gestured to the foundation behind her. "This place isn't just a building. It's a promise that no child should feel like they have nowhere to go, that no one should be abandoned, that there will always be hope." The crowd was silent for a moment, and then the sound of applause filled the air. Emily let out a shaky breath, feeling something inside her shift. She had told her story. She had taken back her voice, and she had been heard. As the ceremony wrapped up, Emily was about to step down from the stage when Martha suddenly cleared her throat. "Wait just a moment, darling," she said, a twinkle in her eye. Emily blinked as Jack stepped forward, holding a small box. Her brow furrowed. "What's this?" Jack smirked. "A surprise." He handed her the box, and Emily carefully opened it. Inside was a delicate crown, handmade from pages of old books, carefully woven together with tiny pressed flowers. She gasped. Martha smiled. "The children helped make it for you. They wanted you to have a real crown, one that meant something." Emily's throat tightened as she lifted it from the box. The paper was soft beneath her fingers, the words printed on the pages barely visible beneath the careful folds. She turned to Jack. "You knew about this?" Jack's grin widened. "I might have had a hand in it." Emily bit her lip, touched beyond words. Slowly, she placed the crown on her head. The crowd cheered. But before she could step away, Jack pulled something else from his pocket, a small hardcover book. Emily frowned in confusion. "What's that?" Jack held it out to her. The cover was beautiful, with soft illustrations of a young girl standing on a pile of books, a delicate paper crown on her head. The title read, "The Girl with the Paper Crown." Emily's breath hitched. She turned to Jack, eyes wide. "You wrote this?" Jack shrugged. "Had some help, but yeah." Her fingers traced the cover, barely able to believe what she was seeing. "It's your story," Jack said softly, "and now it belongs to anyone who needs to hear it." Emily swallowed past the lump in her throat. "Jack, this is pretty great," he teased. She laughed, shaking her head. "More than that." Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. His voice was quiet, meant just for her. "You've always been special, Emily," he murmured. "Not because of the crown, not because of where you came from, but because of the way you care. That's what makes you real royalty." Emily blinked back tears. She thought back to the girl she had once been, the one clutching a broken tiara, shivering in the rain. And now here she was, standing tall, wearing a crown made of stories, surrounded by the people who loved her. She had survived. She had found her purpose, and she was ready to change lives. The world outside the New Dawn Foundation was painted in soft hues of gold and lavender as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke, wrapping the world in a quiet, peaceful embrace. Inside the foundation's main hall, laughter and warmth filled the space. Children curled up in cozy reading nooks, their small fingers flipping through pages of books that transported them to magical worlds. A group of teenagers sat around a long table, working on an art project. The hum of conversations and the occasional burst of laughter made the room feel alive, like a place where hope had taken root and refused to let go. Emily stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold. A year ago, she never could have imagined a moment like this. She never could have imagined happiness looking quite like this. Jack approached from across the room, his usual easygoing demeanor in place. "Library's a hit," he said, nodding toward a group of kids sprawled out on beanbags, completely lost in their books. Emily grinned. "Told you stories could save lives," Jack chuckled. Yeah, you win this one." Emily glanced at the bookshelves, at the world she had helped build. "It's strange," she admitted. "All those years in that house, I thought happiness meant fancy things. Grand parties, big mansions, the kind of life Victoria wanted. But it's this. It's the sound of kids laughing. It's people knowing they're safe." Jack studied her for a moment before nodding. "You figured it out earlier than most people do." Before she could respond, the front doors opened, and Richard stepped inside. He wasn't leaning on a cane anymore, and his eyes, once dull and filled with exhaustion, were full of life. Emily met him halfway, hugging him tightly. "Hey, Dad." He squeezed her back. "Hey, sweetheart." They walked side by side into the library, past rows of books that lined the walls. Richard glanced around, taking it all in. "You've done something incredible here," he murmured. "Something that will outlive all of us." Emily let out a soft laugh. "Not bad for a girl who thought she'd never make it out of a landfill, huh?" Richard's face turned serious. He stopped walking, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Don't ever let anyone define you by where you started," he said firmly. "It's where you end up that matters." Emily nodded, the weight of his words settling deep in her heart. They continued walking until they reached the back of the library, where a small glass case sat on display. Inside, on a delicate velvet cushion, rested the paper crown, the one the children had made for her on opening day. Emily ran her fingers along the glass, smiling. Jack walked up beside them. "Still wearing an invisible one, though," he teased. Emily smirked. "Of course. Can't be royalty without a crown." Richard chuckled, shaking his head. "You know, when you were little, I used to buy you those plastic princess tiaras. I thought giving you those things would make you feel special." He looked at her now, his expression soft. "But I see it now. It was never about the crown. It was always about you." Emily swallowed hard, blinking back the sudden sting of emotion. Jack clapped a hand on Richard's shoulder. "She's a legend now. Kids here are already calling her the girl with the paper crown." Emily rolled her eyes. "You started that, didn't you?" Jack grinned. "Maybe." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows through the library windows, Emily looked around at the people who had become her family. Richard, who had fought his way back from the brink to become the father she had always needed. Jack, the man who had once walked away from everything, only to find his way back to where he was meant to be. Martha, who had stepped in as the warmth and wisdom Emily had never known she needed. And the children, dozens of them, who would grow up knowing they were loved, knowing they had a future. Emily touched the glass case one last time before turning back to her father. "Come on," she said. "Let's go home." Richard smiled, wrapping an arm around her as they walked out together. As the cool evening breeze brushed against her skin, Emily tilted her head back, gazing at the sky. She had spent so much of her life searching for treasure, for something to make her feel whole, and now she knew. The greatest treasures weren't made of gold or jewels. They were made of kindness, love, and the people who stood by you when the world tried to tear you down. And as she walked toward her future, she carried those treasures with her. Life has a way of testing us. It pushes us to our limits, strips away what we thought we knew, and forces us to face the truth about ourselves, about the people around us, and about what really matters. Emily's story is not just about survival, it's about transformation. It's about finding strength in the unlikeliest of places, trusting the right people, and choosing to rise above what was meant to break you. She could have let her past define her. She could have let betrayal, loss, and fear harden her heart. But instead, she turned her pain into purpose. She didn't just save herself. She built something that would save others. And isn't that what true strength is? Not the absence of fear, but the courage to push forward despite it. Not power or wealth, but the ability to lift others up. Not being born into privilege, but choosing to be the kind of person who makes the world a better place. This story reminds us that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up when you need them most. It's about the ones who fight for you, believe in you, and remind you of your worth even when you forget it yourself. Jack, who once lost himself in the pursuit of wealth, found something far more valuable: the chance to make things right. Richard, who once thought success was measured in numbers, realized that the greatest legacy you can leave behind is the lives you touch. And Emily, who once felt powerless, became a beacon of hope for others. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's kindness changed your life? Do you believe in second chances? Let's talk about it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like Emily's remind us that no matter where we come from, no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always a new dawn waiting.